But I don't think that's really what Paul is meaning by the term philosophy there. I don't think he's talking about philosophy like let's study Plato and Aristotle, these kind of guys. In fact, in the PDF, you can get additional slides where I argue what I think Paul is actually getting at. By the way, this is out of Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, that passage. Anybody remember what Colossians chapter 2 goes on to warn the Colossians about? What was happening to Colossae that prompted Paul to bring up this issue of philosophy and vain deceit? You read the rest of the chapter, you find that the Colossians were being injured by this insidious form of legalism. And proto-New Age Gnosticism was beginning to infect them. And so he was trying to stave that off. You can get the arguments for why I think he's getting at what he's getting at. But let me appeal to authority to defend my working thesis that there's something that philosophy actually can do for us more than just, again, as a vaccination against bad philosophy. For example, Clement of Alexandria, and I have more quotes than I'm going to give you, but I just left a few in this version. Clement of Alexandria says, "There is then in philosophy, though stolen as fire by Prometheus, a slender spark, capable of being fanned into a flame, a trace of wisdom, and an impulse from God." So he's thinking, well, there may be some stuff that's smoldering there that actually can be ignited into truth. Augustine says, "Moreover, if those who are called philosophers, and especially the Platonists," you see, he's a Platonist, have said all that is true and in harmony with our faith, we are not only not to shrink from it, but to claim it for our own use from those who have unlawful possession of it. This is the all truth is God's truth frame of mind. That's what he's getting at here. So if the philosopher says something true and it comports with our faith and we can use it, let's use it. John Calvin, of all people. And I say of all people because in my experience, there's a large segment of the Reformed community in the United States who would be the most resistant to the idea that philosophy has something to say. For a number of theological reasons, some of which I don't necessarily quarrel with the theology behind the reasons. But be that as it may. But listen to what John Calvin said. "But if the Lord has been pleased to assist us by the works and ministry of the ungodly in physics, dialectics," which I think for our purposes would mean philosophy, "mathematics, and other similar sciences, let us avail ourselves of it, lest by neglecting the gifts of God spontaneously offered us, we are justly punished for our sloth." He goes on, "Therefore, in reading the profane authors," that's the philosophers, "the admirable light of truth displayed in them should remind us that the human mind, however much fallen and perverted from its original integrity, is still adorned and invested with admirable gifts from its Creator." And then he says, "Shall we say that the philosophers, in their exquisite researches and skillful description of nature, were blind? Nay, we cannot read the writings of the ancients on these subjects without the highest admiration." Francis Turretin, "Philosophy has many and varied uses in theology, which must be accurately distinguished from its many abuses." Now, you may not have ever heard of Francis Turretin. I include him on here because I like his hair, basically. So I told some of the groups before that I'm lobbying for a return to the academic leagues. I'm threatening to walk into one of my courses with just real long curly locks and just, Isaac Newton saying, "Wendy girls going to walk in and say, oh, there's something about philosophy." Francis Turretin probably is the single biggest influence in American Presbyterianism. He was a Puritan theologian, and his writings, his 3-volume systematic theology, probably exerted more influence on how, in sort of the shape of American Reformed thought than any other Puritan. So he's significant in that regard. He goes on to say, "They sin in defect who hold that philosophy is opposed to theology and should therefore be altogether separated from it, not only as useless but also as positively hurtful." So he's disagreeing with it. So what do we do with the Isaiah verse? "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Let me render it in a different format here and say something about it. If I walked in here and somebody said, "You know what, this guy walked at me, slapped me upside the head, handed 10,000 rand to put it in the hand and walk off." you would want to know, well, who's this guy? Who are you referring to? So when you look at pronouns like mine, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are my ways your ways, you have to ask, well, who is the mine? What's the antecedent of the pronoun? Well, it's easy to see. Wait, hold on a second, go back. It's easy to see because it says the Lord. So we know who said it. But look at the next pronoun. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways. I submit to you that, at least in my experience, most people that read this verse will falsely assume that the "your" is the reader, that the text is telling you, the reader, that God's thoughts are not your thoughts. I do a Bible study on occasion that I've been building for years called "What Does This Verse Mean to You?" which is sort of a sarcastic title. And the subtitle is "The Most Commonly Taken Out of Context Verses That I've Encountered." This is the top of the list. Every time I've heard this verse preached, it's always been preached as some kind of slam against man's thinking versus God's thinking. But look how the verse reads in context here. So you add the other verses, 6 and 7 before 8 and 9. Seek the Lord while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thought. Now look what wicked his way does. Go ahead, next slide there. Watch what it looks. Let the wicked forsake his ways, for the Lord's ways are not the ways of the wicked. And the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he'll mercy unto our God, for he will abundantly pardon. Just go ahead and render that one there. So in other words, it's the way of the wicked that are contrasted with the ways of the Lord, and it's the thoughts of the wicked that are contrasted with the thoughts of the Lord. It's not your ways and your thoughts as God's child. Now, I'm not denying that God's thoughts aren't our thoughts in the sense that He's infinite and I'm not. I'm not denying that. But hopefully, your Christian life is getting to the point that more and more, your ways and thoughts are the ways and thoughts of the Lord. That's what it's supposed to be. So, far from this being some kind of indictment of human thinking and logic and these kind of things, it's actually making a statement about righteousness and holiness. And it's an indictment on unrighteousness and wickedness. Now, another accusation that I've got in terms of even the legitimacy of my thesis is, well, isn't philosophy elitist? The backstory of this particular objection, you can get the details later, but in effect, I ended up being part of a three-way debate in a journal. And so we were debating apologetic methodology and the age of the earth. And you're going to go, okay, that's a weird combination. But the reason we were doing it is because in the States, the young Earth community, I'm young Earth creationist, the young Earth community has been hijacked by presuppositionalism with its concomitant animus towards philosophy and such. And so three of us wrote these 3 journal articles and responses and all that. It was published in our Christian Apologetics Journal back in 2013. Then we had a panel debate. That's actually on my YouTube channel. If you want to see that, have trouble falling asleep one night, you can go watch the 2-hour conversation between the 3 of us. So this is what Scott Oliphant from Westminster Seminary, he was one of the interlocutors, this was the criticism he leveled against me. He basically was saying this. He said, Richard, if you're telling me that theology and also apologetics needs philosophy, if you're telling me that, then to the degree that a Christian doesn't have the inclination or even the aptitude to do philosophy, then you're basically saying they can't do theology and apologetics. You're making it to where there's some kind of magisterium and you've got to go to the philosophers before you can. That's what he was accusing me of. So, I thought that over. I said, okay, how do I respond? So I more or less came up with this response, and he was just completely underwhelmed by my response. But I said this, I tried to draw a parallel. A child can know what a flower is and the plant that it grows on. And she knows that the flower is not a human being. So suppose her mother said, honey, would you go pick me a flower and bring it to mommy? I mean, she's not going to walk out there and get the dog poops and then walk over and put it in the sink. I mean, if she knows what the word is, I don't know why she's doing this. She's got some kind of problem with her, scoliosis or something going on. But anyway, as long as she knows what the word means, she knows that what a flower is. She knows who mommy is. She's not confused about that. But if you wanted to delve deeper into the nature of that flower and the plant it grows on. I'll just say flower as a sort of a synecdoche for the plant it grows on as well. If you want to delve deeper into what is a plant, then you're going to have to do botany. Now, likely, once you start doing botany, you've put the conversation out of bounds and out of reach of the little girl. She's not going to be able to do botany. Now, is that elitist? I can't believe you say that in order to study plants, I got to do botany, because you just made it elitist. No, I'm just saying, as you get deeper into the analysis, the people who are capable of doing that analysis may become a smaller and smaller group. In fact, if you pressed it beyond just the study of the plant, wanting to get into the chemistry, to study this photosynthesis, then you're going to have to do a chemical study. Now it's even more attenuated as to who's going to do that. You want to go deeper still into the molecular and subatomic elements of that flower and plant, then you're going to have to do physics. But none of us would consider that as an indictment on these disciplines, even though once those disciplines come into play, it does make it out of reach. So I would submit to you by comparison, suppose that there were other things about the flower and the plant that we wanted to account for, and the mother. Besides that, for example, what it is that makes a flower, and makes a human, are their respective natures. Now, let me just interrupt myself here. It's me interrupting myself. That's controversial philosophically, so I understand that. That's why I showed you my hand earlier and said, look, I'm coming at this as a classical realist and Aristotelian Thomist. So I believe there are such things as natures, and the difference between a human and a plant has to do with one has a human nature and one has a plant nature. And something may have a giraffe nature and something may have a lion nature. A lot of philosophers today, including Christian philosophers, might not agree with me. That's fine. To the degree that sort of mitigates the truthfulness of my overall thesis, you can push back on it if you want during the Q&A. But nevertheless, the whole discussion about natures is metaphysics. That's a branch of philosophy. How we know that one is a flower and the other is a human being is epistemology. Branch of philosophy deals with knowing. And I would submit we know these things by our senses. That's another Aristotelian Thomistic doctrine. We value the human over the flower because of the different kinds of things they are. It's by virtue of the kind of thing they are that we value them differently. So you back it up and you run over the flower, you don't really care about that. But if you backed up and ran over a person, you would just be mortified because of the difference it is to be a person versus to be a flower. Well, that kind of discussion is, among other things, what you can get to in ethics and meta-ethics, a branch of philosophy.